Okay, Doug, let me know when you're back.
I am back. Looks like Carson's back, waiting on pause.
So these slides are just to support the conversation wherever you'd like to take it. So these, I didn't intend to get through them all. They're just kind of a toolkit of conversation. So I'd like to know where you'd like to go next in this discussion, because we could go a couple in different directions. We could continue this discussion and how it applies to the current catalog, and even talk about catalogs if you want. There's lots of examples here, but we don't have to look at those. There was this discussion that was made earlier about we have a struggle with how do we take a team who's got planned work on a backlog and also get them to think about unplanned work, and how does that get correlated, prioritized collectively, and made visible? That's another part of the conversation that we were having. There is a discussion we could go into the specific roles and responsibilities around some of these things, like service owner, product owner. How do they relate and how do they interact? And then there's this whole premise of getting into a process-based organization, consistency across structure, which is where the SMO would come in. So what would you like to do in that context as far as the next conversations?
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Troy. So I think that a couple of key takeaways from today's meeting will be how can the existing product management organization work more closely and in conjunction with the service management organization. So how can the team work more cohesively together and clearly define some of the roles, responsibilities, and integration between the two organizations. I share a little bit about the Scrum silos that are working to create a components that interwork in a product, but we're still kind of lacking in service management, right? So we're still building a product that's not as service focused as we could and should be. So we're not really delivering the value to the customer that they need and want. The service management piece is relatively new to the digital workplace business unit. We've got extremely intelligent programmers, developers, product managers, product owners that are laser focused on delivering a quality product, but we really need to focus more attention on building, delivering, and integrating quality services. So how does the SMO and the PMO work together more closely?
Understood, but I need to ask you a question of clarification. So when I use the word service management, I think about the practices of an enterprise value chain and how they flow from a front door conversation through a development cycle, how that all has to be, all the kinds of work we basically have to do have to be balanced, prioritized collectively, and how we actually get out the other side of a value chain. Maybe using automation for that, but I use that word to define service management. And there are a number of practices in that service management community that basically all collectively do that. That's the process architecture. What I think you're describing service management to be is the context of service orientation, service strategies, service publishing.
Yes.
Context.
Yes, that's right.
All right.
That's right. Okay, so how we can take the frameworks that, how we take the frameworks that we're working in today, which are not working as well as they could, and do a better job of working together to deliver services by combining service strategy, service operation, and product to bring value to the customer, right?
Okay, so that's the conversation of intake and collaboration. That's up here.
Yes.
This discussion down here is now what's a service owner and a product owner? How do they interrelate, and how do I actually connect all of that together? So yes, those are slightly different discussions.
That's the one. How do we interconnect everything together? That's the one that we really, I think, need to walk away from today with. Shinya, would you agree?
Yeah.
But the challenge is they're interconnected, guys, because.
But I didn't get the idea of what service. What was it?
Service owner.
Troy was describing and what Doug was saying, I didn't understand the difference in between those two.
So when we talk about service management, traditionally, we talk about the top two boxes. There are a set of management practices that we all collectively have to do together in a common way to receive demand and to deliver service. These are the ITIL management practices of engagement, planning, design, transition, production support. Then there's what we're doing it for, because that's still a means to an end, which is a service architecture supported by a product architecture. And then there are roles of ownership here that are not necessarily the same roles that own incident management, service desk, change management, portfolio management, architecture management. Those are two discrete conversations, but they connect. Service ownership, product ownership here, service product lifecycle management here. Management practice integration here. And there's process owners here. All three have to work together to actually deliver consistent, coherent practice outcomes, services. So when you say service management, Doug, I heard you talking in here, but I would dial this mostly the focus of service management as I would traditionally have defined it. But again, I want to answer the question you're trying to ask me. So they're parts of the same conversation, but where would you like to start?
I think that, sorry, I had to step away for just 2 seconds here. I think that those slides that you presented just a second ago, you said this is service owner, product owner, and how they work together. Let's start there.
Start in the middle.
Yeah, let's start in the middle.
But we will, because the service management office, Doug, only operates up here.
Okay.
This is a service strategy and service organization, which has its own, which is outside of the purview of a service management office. A SMO, as we classically understand it, is an office or a group that tries to create consistent practice across the value chain for specific IT management practices.
Yeah, so that comes into play with what we're calling the global services factory, where there would be a global definition of process standards, best practices, but there's also the need for a global services catalog that will help stand up and support those processes, right? So I think the service architecture is where that catalog lies, and process architecture is where the SMO operates. Is that right?
That's what I was trying to say. And the SMO is doing all of that to support this, because both the technology system and the standard way we approach managing it all are both means to an end to deliver these.
Yeah.
But there are roles that are unique to the center that are not the roles here or here. And that's where I'm trying to kind of pick out where you'd like to go, because the SMO is here, but the concept of a service product owner and relationship of engagement with a consumer, that's in here. Both are open for conversation.
Let's start in the middle. We can work our way out.
Okay, and then we'll work our way back to the top. Okay, very good. So let's continue that dialogue. So in this slide deck, there are examples here.
Maybe just because before the break, I had some questions for, if you can go back to your air travel slide.
Yes, please.
So here you described it that it's built from, or it's rely on resources, products, and then what you get. Is that also how you would define services, how you would describe them?
In fact, absolutely. And we usually, when defining services, work backwards from the outcomes our customers are trying to achieve, not from the bottom up.
Okay, so this is exactly what we also try. Are you, or did you heard about Blue Edge method for service?
No, it's a new one for me.
Okay, so this
how
is
would you describe it?
What we pick up. Yeah, also you put in focus the question, what is in for the customer, what he wants like to have. So here in your example, he would like to travel. Okay, so we provide him travel service. How he want to travel, based on his categories, maybe by bus, by plane, etc. So then you break down, and in the end, based on what are the requests of the customer, you choose then the correct product.
Or even maybe assemble specific offerings for
Right.
specific customer types to hit specific types of requests. Absolutely. So you work backwards from the outcome, the problem to be solved. And what traditionally we work with IT groups that are not service centric is we ask, okay, what business processes do they need support for? What technologies are you currently leveraging to support those business processes? What are they doing? Now describe what they're doing in relationship to the outcome they're supporting. So the service name should always tag back to that outcome if possible. It's not always possible because a technology service is not going to be called enterprise resource planning or HR management, right? It's going to be called hosting, storage, and network. So when we come to service definition, we're trying to define services as close to the outcome they're enabling. So this is exactly what we promote and teach. And so if I look down here, right, the service as we describe it should basically support the line of business process we're enabling. If this is an internal IT conversation, they have on that line of business side product and business owners, and so they in themselves are doing the same thing. Their process is supporting a product, it's a product supporting an outcome, and that can be then referenced here. So the service name we're trying to make as close to possible as to the customer, to the outcome the customer is trying to achieve. So I'm saying yes to everything you just said.
Cool.
Okay. So coming back to this discussion, let's begin here then. Okay. So when we think about an engagement process with a customer, there's a couple of typical roles that we would talk about in relationship to service management. There's an outcome or solution owner. That's the business problem, or the customer problem that's being solved. There's also often an account manager. If it's externally focused, we call them an account manager. If it's internally focused between one group in Konica to another, it could be called a relationship manager. They do the same thing. They speak on a regular basis with a consumer about the services as currently being leveraged or potentially to be leveraged. And this is an ongoing cadence, a regular relationship. And this relationship has basically a three kind of point agenda when they're meeting together. The first, describing and discussing services as currently being used. Here's how it's going. What's going well, what's not going well. What about the incidents? What about the changes, enhancements? What about the projects we've got specifically on board for this? So it's this progress report on services currently being subscribed to or used. The next part of the conversation typically goes, where do you want to go next? And how can I help you get there? The third part of the conversation is, because we're not just catching demand, we're also influencing demand by opportunity. Here's what we are thinking about. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're presenting as a new idea. We're building machine learning and AI ops into this, and we think it's the thing of the future. Would you like to explore that with us? And so this is an ongoing cadence relationship that's based on data. And that data has to come from service reports, because we have to know the outcomes and how it's going from a critical to quality performance attribute basis. And I might be also, of course, be updating them on the progress of initiatives or major projects I'm doing for them. This is an ongoing cadence of usually every month minimum. And we talk about a relationship management type of role in that context. So I'm imagining you have some kind of role like that engaged with your your customers. Is that a correct assumption?
We do. We have, well, it depends on where you are at. So if you're in the United States, All Covered has a relationship manager. There's actually two different types. There's a strategic account manager for large accounts, and then there's an account manager that manages smaller accounts and more of them. There's also a sales resource. We call them IT solution consultants that are hunters and not managers.
Sure. That represents all of this type of role up here. Okay.
Right.
And their goal is, and their job is, to meet with their customers on a regular basis, hopefully, if not just what can I sell you, but how can I enhance your use of current services, and how can I become a strategic partner, moving left to right on the previous model first thing this morning.
So
Does that
just
make
for
sense?
context, business relationship management in that sense is a foreign idea in the traditional business. Traditional business, you've got a hunter that goes out and closes a deal. It's a relatively short sales cycle, less than 30 days. Once they've closed the deal, they don't come back and engage that customer again till the end of their lease or near the end of their lease. While in the IT services, managed services world, yes, exactly. You've got level one supplier mentality, right?
Yep. To do anything to the right of the heavy line, this is an ongoing and constantly managed relationship. Okay, so
Agreed.
that brings us into the next role, which is the outcome owner. Okay, so this, if you want to use outcome or service or solution, be free to change any of those words. They're interchangeable. I will talk about a service and outcome, like the outcome we're creating. This relationship isn't, well, it's good, but it doesn't, this person here doesn't have the organizational knowledge to answer off catalog questions, because they are not the outcome owner. They're representing multiple outcomes which are presented on the website, your service catalog in this case. So in some conversations, it's okay, we've got one of those and we'll just, plug and play. And I use my standard offers, my service offerings to have that conversation. And we don't need to bring this person to the table, but sometimes we're off catalog or a completely new conversation comes to the table. And now I have to bring this person to this discussion because this is a three-way relationship. This person can go directly here because they have a relationship with this person ongoing through the experience of the, the contract. If it's a technical conversation, they'll likely go here, right? Now, if it becomes an account conversation, I'd like to increase or adapt or adopt or change, then this person has to be brought to the table because now I have to possibly create amendments or, additional agreements have to be placed that are above and beyond or custom, right? So this dialogue is a three-way, and these two people have to work critically close to each other. However,
can I add clarifying questions to this?
Please, absolutely.
So the business relationship management role that you've got at the top there, the customer liaison, could be representing multiple individuals depending upon what stage in the sales cycle they're in, whether they're being nurtured or they're being hunted. The service owner would also represent multiple individuals based upon the number of services being delivered or being purchased by the consumer. Is that right?
Many to one. They have many customers. Right. Absolutely.
And that service owner is typically defined in the service catalog, which is lacking, just for your context, is lacking in most of the organization globally. There is a partial catalog in some of the operating companies in some of the regions. Those catalogs are not consistent. They don't contain the same metadata. They don't have a common standard or best practice. And so two of the people that are responsible for that, just for your context again, and Karsten and John are working very closely together, John in the US, Karsten in Europe, to try to align that. But from a service owner perspective, I would say that if you were to ask many of the business relationship managers who owns which services, they wouldn't be able to answer the question right now. And if John and Karsten, you're welcome to chime in if you agree or disagree.
Unfortunately, I have to agree because we don't have any common.
Well, in All Covered, we do have defined service owners for the things in the service catalog. So that's one of the few things that we've kind of at least put a name to a service.
Excellent. And do they manage the whole life cycle of service? What, portfolio, what needs to be invested in that we're not doing, what needs to be stabilized but not invested in, and what needs to be retired?
You're a dreamer.
That would be the job.
I know. In reality, we have a lot more maturity to go to get to what you just were leading me down. So no, they're not doing all that.
Should we if maybe this helps to go through an example and put here the responsibilities for maybe, I don't know, one of our servers. Because
I'm sorry. Yes, I think that's a great idea. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'd like to kind of just finish the picture, and then we'll just
Sure.
do exactly that.
Okay.
So my last global organization I worked with was a manufacturing organization. They had both an outcome owner, tangent, named, but they didn't do the things I described. And there's more that they should do, by the way, which is on the next slide. And they had these folks, but rather than work together and meet together on a regular basis, they competed and hated each other. Okay, competed with and hated each other. There was no interaction. In fact, there was competition between them. So that's a problem as well. I've seen very, very frequently. And well, this person will sell whatever they want to make their dollar, right? Their quota. This person then is often left hanging because they're not part of this conversation when it's off catalog. When it's on catalog, fine, they're empowered to sell what's on the catalog according to the standards. When it's off catalog, this person has to come in to talk about it. And the three of them agree. But that for this person can actually agree, there are supporting services they need to go back, infrastructure services, database services, network services, all cover services, whatever there might be, that they're embedding in their catalog, because everybody has a catalog. And the thing I'm selling here is embedding elements of this. And I have to also see if it's feasible here relative to strategy and architecture. So there's this conversation of supporting and enabling type of outcomes, both technical and professional, that have to be understood before I can provide an answer back up here. Okay, all of these are outcome owners. These are not technology or product owners. These product owners support outcomes. Now, it just might be that this person owns a product on-prem under their purview. That's fine. The service owner and the product owner could be the same. You'll see more detail on them in a second. But many of these product owners are actually outside of my organization, whether that's inside Konica or outside Konica. It's still outside of my immediate organization, and I'm subcontracting to them. Some of them are inside my brand and some of them out. So these are the technology solution versus the outcome service premise. And it's these owners here, which are the ones that are defining the outcomes. And it's not the service catalog manager who writes the service descriptions, it's the service owner, right? And all of this conversation, which is going to drive this strategy, gets up into this dialogue up here, which is the service portfolio discussion. What services do I need in my portfolio that I currently don't have? Which ones do I want to stabilize and not invest in much? Which ones do I want to retire? And then there's an executive or category or service line owner, which has groupings of services, which these people have a relationship to, right? So this is a person who's part of an organization which has a grouping or family of services, which has an executive type of role here. All right. And there's one more. This is the dashboard performance management service level kind of creation capability that enables all of these roles to have the data they need about, are we achieving or not achieving the agreed performances that we've promised to meet and manage expectations. All right, let's open it up.
Yeah, so Shinya, Kaz, this I think is the kind of the crux of what we want to get out of today's call, right?
So product managers written here will not interact with service consumer. Is that so?
This will depend. If the product and the service owner are the same, then that is the same person. So that's a yes, they would. If the service owner is abstracted from the product owner, like you have a product manager, then not necessarily.
So imagine, for example, some web application that is very how can I say, having UX as a competitive point of the product, and product owners or some developer always need feedback from the service consumer or the user, right? So how can that interaction happen then?
So it's a great question. Give me 1 second. There's a couple of different roles that I didn't put in this deck that I'll show you different views based on your question.
And by the way, role definition of our product managers have to define the outcome, the part as well. So maybe that's overlapping, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I'm looking for the deck I need here. I'm sorry to.
I was going to say, you're pretty good at finding those slides and all those decks.
This is the vendor
That's
management office conversation I wanted to have, but there's another view of it if I want to actually get, which is the project oriented view of it. Okay, so because you have an interesting question, which it's a legitimate question.
Yeah, so while Troy is looking for the slide, so the one question about the, can I confirm about the difference about the original PM and your team, the PM, the same meaning, the product manager, I think, but the definition is absolutely different, or now to be aligned, the same meaning?
Different. So
Different, right? Yeah.
product managers in regional operation companies or nodes are basically marketing functionality.
Yeah. I see.
Okay.
Yeah. But your side is about more project management focus, but named product manager.
Product
right?
management, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to the projects, and we talk about the classic idea of a product owner, which we can get back to in the other deck as well. The product owner, there's a relationship here between the consumer and this dialogue as well. So the product and the service owner may or may not be the same. Some of the products this person owns, some of the products they subcontract in, because you don't own ServiceNow. So the product owner for ServiceNow, there's actually a product owner in ServiceNow who owns ServiceNow, and then you have a corresponding product owner in your organization which front ends that part of your portfolio. So whether there are products that you own on-prem and other ones you plug in, that'll be the question of whether the service and the product owner is the same in specific contexts. But they need this relationship as well. And we also need, there's a discussion about backlog grooming and all of that. This is going to be in the hands, of course, of the product service owner. But when it comes to understanding acceptance criteria or business analysis type roles and activities, I'm going to actually have to have a BA role. In fact, this consumer probably will have another person down here that is their point of contact for requirements generation. So this could be a customer sponsor. I have another person down here. So I could extend that dialogue in here between the development team and even a person down here. In fact, this model could be extended to more of a tactical and operational level. When it comes to project mode, you're quite correct, but you still have this relationship going on in an engagement type of scenario.
Hey, Troy, real quick, just to make sure I'm clear about what you just said. I think what you said was, so the business relationship management role engages the customer, and the customer has some need, some requirement that needs to be architected, and the BRM might bring in someone who is technical that could help develop that solution for them and interface with whether it's the dev team or the infrastructure team or whomever to build that solution.
Exactly right. So in NITIL 4, we talk about the service consumer as a generic role. But in that service consumer role, we break it down into 3 additional roles. There's a sponsor who pays for, funds. There's a customer who defines requirements, speaks on behest of the organization we're interfacing with. And then there's a user. And there's even a relationship on that context of the user to the service desk, right? So When I think about a engagement channel, there's the what would you like to get done on a project basis, but I can also think of an in front door of my engagement having 3 discrete levels of demand capture. I've got relationship management happening for strategic, and with that, relationship management doesn't just mean the BRM. The relationship management could be the BRM, the service owner / product owner, right? So this is strategic engagement through where do we want to take this account and what problems do you want to solve? Another demand channel ongoing into your organization now is service catalog. It's not just a marketing tool. It's a place where I go to transact business, see services that I like, find a button that says buy me now, and begin an engagement for tactical demand capture. Another key channel you need to create, which is consistent now into the more tactical operational premise into your organization that you're serving, is a service desk as well. So if you think of the front door of this value chain as having 3 discrete demand channels, all demand channels have to be, all these 3 demand channels have to be defined. The conversations we're having up here are also extended down here into tactical, and the VA is part of that tactical discussion as well for projects. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
That we're back into the process architecture.
Yeah, can you please go back to the 3 customer slide? That was very useful.
The 3 customers, yes.
The customer, sponsor, and who? Which one was the last one? User.
So consumer is a generic term. ITIL defines into 3 roles, and each of these roles would have a different relationship partner or connecting.
I see.
Now, it could be all the same person, but the reality is there's 3 roles, and each of the 3 roles defines value differently. The sponsor wants to understand return on investment. The customer wants to understand statement of work completed, service levels achieved. The user wants to understand, is this a positive UX experience? And I can't ask the customer to speak to UX. So I'm going to have users involved in my setup and also in provide demand channels in for specific forms of service.
Okay, thank you. So Doug, who in our organization can be a service owners? I mean, it needs to be a like big team. It's not something we can act. Although
it does need to be a large team, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you some examples from All Covered, right? In fact, and we need to come back to this, Troy. You're doing a really good job here on this slide and where you were leading us, but give me a second to add some context, if you don't mind.
Please.
And actually, John Kern, do you think you could walk us through the current catalog? Maybe I can just let you do it.
Yeah, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, but I'd be happy to. Troy, can I share out, please?
Yes, please. I think Doug may have to give you a role. How do you want to do that, Doug?
Yeah, let me go ahead.
If you quit sharing, I think I should be able to share. There we go.
There we go.
Okay, so the All Covered Service Catalog is put together in SharePoint. Not the best system. It's a manual process. Nothing's automated here, where everything you're going to see is manually typed in. It doesn't pull from data sources.
And maybe focus on service ownership as you go through this. That's really what the question was, right, Shinya?
Yeah, that's why I figured you were having me go in here. So this is kind of an overview of the things in our service catalog. And the translation of who the service owner is we have multiple groups that handle our service transition. So like our security services, we have a security vertical within the company. And so the service owners of these security services, most of them go back to that group. So like if I click on the managed UTM service, the service owner here is Angel Fisher, and she leads that department. Where if I go in and look at one of our managed services, let's look at email protection service. This goes to a gentleman named Brian Lucky, who is in charge of, who leads up our managed service division of our company, our vertical in our company. And that's, so when Troy asked, is this service owner, are they truly looking at the whole life cycle of the service? The good news is that our organization has matured to the point where all these service owners know what those words mean. I mean, they've all taken some ITIL training, and they get the concept, or at least ITIL V3 training, and they know if you were to ask them a question like that, that you wouldn't catch them off guard. We're speaking a common vocabulary across the different groups, which is a big step in the right direction. But is actually this part of their daily looking at all the services and doing continual service improvement and all that? To some degree, some service owners are better than others. And a lot of these service owners have people that report to them that person really is the service owner. It's just they're not at the top of the org chart.
So that would be like the category or service line owner I'm describing. Right.
Yeah, we don't use that term internally, but totally. So, like for example, I'm doing service design for All Covered. So I'm managing the service design process, and I'm working with one of the service line owners right now to build out a new workstation backup service. It's going to replace one of the existing ones we have in the catalog. And so, in all purposes, this individual is the service owner. He knows more about it than anybody. And his manager's manager actually reached out to me this morning on this call saying, I don't understand how this works. He's on vacation. Can you help me? And luckily, because I'm building service design packages as I'm building out these services, I was able to go into that and get the answers for him on behalf of the service line owner. That's where we're at. It's not a perfect system by any means. And if you see, there's a lot of these red asterisks, which means we have not gone down through the process of getting that service completely defined in our service catalog. But we've made a lot of progress over the last year or so.
How many service owners do you think, just, I know you're not going to give an exact number, but swag, how many do you think we have?
Let's say 6. Because in reality, the service owners kind of translate to the verticals, and I may be off on that. The way I would answer that question just quickly is I run a group called the Standards Advisory Council, and I have a membership page on this, and it lists kind of like the verticals I work with. So education, app dev, legal, finance, healthcare, security. So that's 6. And then we got my professional 7. So I'd say 7 to 8 now that I'm looking at it from this perspective.
Would you call those service owners or service line owners?
Service owners. Like these groups listed here plus managed services up here, those are like our main verticals in the company. So the services trickle up to those verticals, and they have a key person, a director or a national manager, and that's the person that we're designating as the quote-unquote service owner. The number of service line owners would probably be 7 or 8 times 3. So let's say 25. Mm-hmm. But that's not a concept. I love the name service line owner, and I'm totally willing to embrace it, but we have not used that term to date. I've been calling them internally service architects. It's not a role in ITIL or anything, but I needed a name to stick on it, so I stuck service architect. I think as a side effect of this meeting, I'm going to go and replace all my wording of service architect to service line owner, because it really is more applicable.
Architect.
Maybe I misunderstood. I thought service line owners were higher than service owners.
They are.
In other words,
it's a category.
Yeah, the service line have a grouping of services, right? So it's the other way around, I think, John, right? So you'd have 7 service line owners and 21 service owners.
All right, good point. I misinterpreted that.
Yeah. So your service owners report into service line or service category owners. and then the service category is often focused on the portfolio and strategy side of that service category and the services within it.
So what
So
we're currently calling service owner is really service line owner.
And they're
And
too high.
what I'm currently calling service architect is really service owner.
Right.
So to answer your question, how many service owners do we have? 25. If you're going to go with that
So Shinya,
logic.
thanks, John. So Shinya, that's when you said there'd be a lot of them. There
Yeah.
would. Almost every service at some point or another would have a service owner. The question is whether or not a service owner would own multiple services, which is possible based upon the size and breadth of the service, right?
Absolutely. And a product owner could be supporting multiple service owners. Because if you have a network service, right, and there's different products under network that I'm using, I could be, leveraging those products differently for different services and different service lines. So it's a many-to-one relationship, products to services, services to service lines. Product owner usually is at the technology layer, the system layer. Service ownership is at the outcome ownership. Service line is at the category of outcome ownership.
One of the challenges that I've had from the get-go of us going down this path is all these service line owners are the person in charge of their silos. And they all know the other silos exist, but they were not good at the cooperating and communicating. And so on your 5 questions, Troy, we would have gotten down to number 3 when you said, can we focus on, and then they would have lost focus with our current situation within All Covered as I see it most of the time.
So let's talk about service portfolio management in this context and how it will connect to project portfolio and to team backlog. This will come directly into SAFe. Okay. I want you to imagine you have a shared services capability where you have all these different mini funnels all hitting the same service organization. Okay. We'll play the game internal, then go out external with this first. So we have, let's say we're talking about a network services group or infrastructure services or hosting or storage type of scenario, okay? I've got all these different product lines that are using the shared infrastructure, network, et cetera, storage, compute, and they all have their own needs, but they're all coming towards a common funnel because they're sharing that same service. So I have to have a process up front that basically says, let me work with the various funnels coming in to understand demand and then to order demand per funnel. Now let's take the top 3 or 4 ideas per funnel and now bring them into the big shared funnel. And some of those things are directly coming from an outside market, business projects. Some of the things I have to do are the internal IT things to do the business projects or the customer projects. Some of the things they're asking for are not projects, so they have to come through another chain of approval, agreement, funding, and then prioritization. So we'll call those business as usual or enhancement type work, not project work. But I also have to get into this big funnel, my own internal legacy, retirement, share, technical debt reduction stuff. Otherwise, if I don't do that, I'm going to be drowning in technical debt. Okay, so I've got to find a way to fit all of that planned work into this now shared funnel where they come in ranked and prioritized as a collective system of demand. Because this is strategy and portfolio, and this is where service line owners are each representing their service lines in this context, okay? Project portfolio management is an annual process. What are we going to do this year relative to this 3 to 5 year type of vision, mid to long-term planning horizon? And I need it to be ranked and prioritized coming in so that I know which sequence of the projects I should do, which is going to be a key input into how teams are going to have to prioritize their backlogs. This is where I need to connect strategy down to team-based backlog. This will come from themes, strategic themes, down into backlog prioritization. So you could do this internal, but you could also say the same thing is outside. And so there's a whole practice, a strategic practice called service portfolio management, which is the service line owners are critically responsible for, and is an engaging by, in project management is talking about resource and scheduling responsibilities. Thoughts, concerns? This is one of the front door practices up here.
I think you just, Shin, you tell me if I'm wrong here, but I'm pretty sure that Troy just nailed it in terms of what we're dealing with.
Yeah. So can you go back to the slide 17, please? So here, we have project portfolio and smaller enhancements. And from those two, how can I say, demand backlog, the agile products team backlog is created. Is it what is illustrated here?
But it's not the whole story. There's planned work and there's unplanned work, and then there's underground work.
Ah, for sure, yeah.
That was also
And
my
this is the
question.
problem you articulated to me earlier. The same team is working on planned work coming in the left, but also unplanned work coming in from the top. And the more fractured your processes are, the more you do things through quote unquote relationships, meaning it's underground black market.
Yeah,
In order to actually understand your team's capacity, you have to get visibility into both planned and unplanned work, and then create prioritization systems that prioritizes all work, not just planned work.
yeah, that's exactly true. And yeah, sorry, can you go back to 17, please?
But who should oversee this
Mm-hmm.
from the role?
Uh-huh. So that's it. But let's answer the first question, and then I'll answer your question.
Yeah.
Hold your question, because that's a good one.
And so there are, so the demands can be fulfilled by not only product team, but also other, like processes or,
Yes.
so how that is drawn here, or?
This is only planned work. This is not unplanned. So here we have planned work coming in, either initiative-based work or enhancement-based work, internal product improvement work, or legacy technical debt reduction. All of that work is all planned. It all has to be planned collectively. If I only look at customer business as the only intake of demand, I'm going to erode my system's availability over time. Let's just take a look at that, what I mean by that statement. This is where a systemic approach to portfolio is critical. Let's imagine I only value the application, right, from the point of view of portfolio, and I prioritize all my funding on the application, but I don't do anything with upgrading my infrastructure or improving my databases or my network. If I fund all of the work towards application, but not the system, what will happen to service availability and reliability? It's a rhetorical question. It will degrade because I have a component or application perspective of portfolio, not a system or product perspective.
Yeah, right.
And so this is critical that we understand there's planned work intake. You see, this software factory that we like to talk about is in the heart of the value chain, but it's not the totality of the value chain. There are practices on the left for demand capture and prioritization. There are practices over top for strategy portfolio. There are practices on the right for run and operate. So this software factory has to understand that it's not alone in the universe. It's in the middle of a full system of value creation. And when you look at the ITIL 4 value chain example, We take the flat manufacturing concept of a value chain, and now we put it into a more three-dimensional premise. And where software would be focused on design, transition, obtain, build, it's not divorced from the rest of the value chain.
Mm.
And if they think they are, then they think they're in a separate universe, but they're not. Especially when the team has to also manage unplanned work that's resulting from technical debt or just service disruption. And the more fractured that this is, the more backroom trading you'll get for who's going to get what done, which is work that's not even on your backlog. So this is an interesting context. I'd like to show you this picture here. And this is a key book that I presented, or the concept of this book, to Doug earlier. This is a book called From Project to Product, moving from project mindset to product. And when product, I mean cross-functional system concept of product. And a product team will be beyond just the application team. There's 4 types of work on that team's backlog in this book. Feature, which is value-based, defect remediation, incident management, risk and regulatory, debt reduction. If there's any kind of work we actually create visibility in on the backlog, which of the 4 types do you actually see in the backlog? Only the feature. But in most cases, when I deal with organizations, 60 to 80% of their actual capacity erosion as a team is on the other 3.
Mm.
And then we try to manage and estimate based on only 1, which is not the largest erosion of capacity. And then if we use lean principles, the more work we put in progress, our load, we implicate the speed of all work. And then what pays the most penalty? Feature. That takes the longest time to get out. And so when we have an iteration, we have to basically be able to look at that iteration and understand what type of work is currently being done in that iteration. It's more than planned work, because if I don't look at both planned and unplanned, then I'm going to give all priority to planned, though the unplanned work may be more urgent from a customer experience premise. And I can lose customer experience, and I can lose customers. Even how I prioritize these 4 forms of work changes in a product lifecycle. In incubation, we don't worry about defect. When I'm going to early market, I'm really focused on defect. Now, in its high productivity, revenue generating, I'm now thinking about possibly architecture work. And then when it's end of life, I do there's a whole view of how prioritizing this work changes over time. So when organizations try to get visibility into their work, we use Kanban boards not to only illustrate planned work, but unplanned work as well. So this is a Scrumban, where I take the planned work out of my sprint planning, not the whole backlog. Just the sprint iteration backlog gets into my Kanban. But the other types of work must be visible on my Kanban to understand work in progress limitation or capacity utilization and prioritization of all of the work collectively.
Now I raise the question, who should oversee that
Okay,
as a role?
this is the product backlog, right? So that's the product owner.
Yeah.
So the context of the product owner has to take the fact that all of that work is being done by their team. This product owner is connected to an outside market. They could be the service owner, or they could be responsible to a service owner. So whether those stakeholders are internal or external, that's another thing, but they understand the whole system of value and prioritization. And they're taking all of that information and translating that need into the backlog room. That's why the development team doesn't decide where they take work off the backlog, only the top. Only how much work off the top is their decision, not what to take where. And this backlog is groomed by the owner, who is aware of a much bigger system. And this is larger business acumen. This is technical acumen. And this is why in Agile Scrum, the product owner should never be a development team member, because the majority of their value added work is in this left circle, not the right circle.
And in this context, product owner should be prioritizing the work or capacity allocation based on the outcome to consumers, right?
Yes.
So
let's, yes, go ahead,
that is
please.
why I think I see some difficulty with those role definitions, the service owner and product owner.
Well, let's go back to the role definitions. We haven't looked at them specifically yet. Okay, so this is the service owner. Remember, the product and the service owner may be the same person. That's a decision of scale. Sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they own certain products, and sometimes they subcontract external projects into their service offering. So whether they're one and the same person is a question, not a definitive answer. But these are the responsibilities of an outcome owner. Ensure service is managed within a business lifecycle focus. What is my market? What does the outcome need to provide? What products do I need to bring into this outcome? How do I have to retire products? Either to bring new product partners in or to remove products, right? This service outcome lifecycle is different than the product lifecycle. ServiceNow has its own lifecycle, which is a shorter possible lifecycle than an outcome lifecycle. They're responsible to the customer for the outcome. They could be independent of the technology completely. Maybe they're not. They're going to have a major relationship in multiple process areas. We already talked about strategy, but there are more. They work with the BRM for the engagement conversation and the upselling and the market understanding. They're going to be working in this portfolio discussion and building business cases for possible new service investment and or retirement. They're engaging with other service owners to do that because I have to bundle in services to my service to basically do the one I'm customer facing with. When it comes to the ITIL processes, they're critically engaged in almost every single one of them. Major incident, the service owner possibly is a big part of that because they're speaking to the customers, right? And they're accountable to the customers. So would the product owners be, by the way, but there's the role there. Problem management, where are the systemic issues in my service, regardless of what product, because I could have 10 products in my service. Release management, when does it make sense for release cadence, scheduling? What's the sequence? Change, when is something approved or not at certain levels, not all levels. Establishing service levels at the service, not necessarily at the product, because I could have a level of agreement at the product level than the service level. Availability, capacity, service continuity, financial management, service models, service costing, chargeback. I could have 5 products into my outcome. And now I have to take all 5 products into my outcome for service model and service costing premise. Product owners, more tactical, but still strategic when it comes to product lifecycle. But remember, a product could be one of many products in a service, right? Where there's a product vision still. There's competitive opportunities, or there's the understanding of ordering and grouping backlog. There's what is the development team currently working on, and how do I keep them focused on prioritizing all work, not just a certain type of work. Understanding and monitoring progress against goals in the context of the product life cycle. So if I take this into the SAFe conversation, let's take it from the top. The organization has a strategy. The strategy is about achieving, some strategic theme, and that's where portfolio management comes in. Portfolio management will then drive, according to that, the needs of the solution. I mentioned I mentioned earlier, solution and or outcome can be synonymous. It's the problem to be solved. That solution will then dictate the need for cadence and release. That's my release train. That's going to drive down into how does that now translate into prioritization of a backlog at a specific product level? Which could even, because if I could have I asked this question, do you have an enterprise product backlog or does every team have a backlog? And you said yes. You know, in Agile, if we have multiple teams working on the same product, the ideal situation is their subset backlog is part of an enterprise single backlog. They're not discrete and disconnected backlogs. So even the product owner, though connected to the outside Venn diagram on the left, this is the outside Venn diagram on the left. Meanwhile, I'm engaging the business in reviews, right? Based on the original decisions that were up here.
So you are seeing value stream part or the solution layer, the second layer from top.
Yeah, these are the value streams of the organization I'm either serving or part of. There's the manufacturing value stream, there's the services value stream, because these services and solutions can support both many or one value streams.
And since these layers are only for scalability, maybe we can skip the second one and have like someone written as a product management act as a service owner, and product owner is anyway at the very bottom, right?
We could, you know, release trains. Do you need quarterly release iterations? That's a safe thing. Really, ideally, you release on the cadence your customers need, not necessarily quarterly. That's a problem I've always had with SAFe.
Yeah, makes sense.
But the product backlogs have to be groomed through a higher level process, which is the front door of the engagement model of the value chain, which is why you can't divorce the process architecture from the product and service architecture, right? So service portfolio management is strategy, and that informs a child process called PPM, project portfolio management. But that is a long-term, and some of it gets into projects and some of it gets into not projects. They both hit the same team backlog, but that team backlog is also impacted by major incidents, defect remediation, and it's also being impacted by stuff you can't see. Meaning, when I think about this, I want you to think about this more like this, right? It's an integrated value chain, which is automated ideally through, you know, DevOps tooling, but they're not discrete things in different parts of the universe.
So Troy, can I share one slide so that I'd like to confirm so that the current relationship between the SPA and the seniors team.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. This one was also what we discussed. The original, so this chat is come from this discussion. Generally, we are thinking about the service delivery ecosystem designed to transit than operation. Then, yeah, there were two of our team is working on, or the seniors team create Epic to development. Our side is about the collecting the business or service requirements and going to the market, the two functions. then that's the reason. So some area we can more tiny collaborate between senior team. Then so through the conversation and your input today, I think so the almost the same meaning. So each service should be defined the service owner. For example, is about the backup, security, or remote management, something like that. And yeah, historically, Shinya is mentioned. They're from the hardware viewpoint. They
But
are.
those are services as well. They're infrastructure services, they're network services, they're database services, and they have products to support those services.
That's the thing. So that it's a good timing. So that your concept and so our definition or terminology to be aligned. Everybody, I think. So yes. So then that is so your definition. These are all service owner. Then the going to development. Each service need a product owner to be managed.
You may have more than one product in a service line, right? Or in a service, even more so in a service line.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to running the business, so our understanding horizontally, to think about so the business impact, profitability, something like that. How to manage the supplier management and to monitor the end-to-end process. Some area you are showing at the presentation, I think.
Yeah, but by the way, this is not how we are working today, but this was an outcome from our discussion. How
Sure.
we collaborate.
So project managers are dedicated to each service line, or do you have a project office that tries to create a common project approach across all service lines? Are they discrete by service, or do you have a project management service that supports projects for service areas?
Here?
Yeah, because project management is a professional service in its own right, which could be either found in silos or a shared service.
In my understanding, so we are not looking into the enough resources to be shared this area.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's more of a line across.
Yeah, otherwise we cannot hire our reserved inside the employee for this area.
Yes.
So conceptually, so it's fully divided by each services. However, the human resources viewpoint to be shared some areas. Yeah.
Because I can have a PMO, like an SMO, and have resources in that shared enterprise service or function. And they could have also a dotted line or solid line to actual dedicated PMs in a service area. And that we can talk about that as well. Or project managers can be discrete and distinctly in every service line and act as independent agents, which now you get a lot of variability. So the same thing that we talk about as a SMO can apply to a PMO or an enterprise architecture group or a shared infrastructure and shared InfoSec group. So I like this. It's going along the right direction, but you could have a product owner, just think about it theoretically, be crossing more than one service line. Right? A product owner may or may not be dedicated in a service line. One product can actually be leveraged by 3 service lines or 3 services. Now,
I just as a comment, maybe I have the feeling that we still also the definition of what is a service is maybe different.
That's
because
possibly.
if I see here sales model, what kind of service is that?
Yes, Carsten, so I understand your point. So do not focus such kind of detail about the definition about how we define about the service itself.
Okay.
Conceptually, so that this timing, so I'd like to address what the Troy is explaining to us, and conceptually we brainstorming the last month to be interlocking, or if we have something gap, so I'd like to address at this timing.
Yeah.
the detailed discussion, in my understanding, the later of today's workshop, so we can address, I think.
Yeah, maybe
like-
this would help if you really fit it with live and one example to have a common understanding. But okay, understood.
And when I see this kind of diagram, I'm always wondering who from where can be like assigned to each of these, like service owner or product owner. We don't have so many.
So
Yes.
then we talk about they would be scaled to be the same sometimes. A small organization won't necessarily delineate between a service owner and a product owner organization. In fact, the service owner may also have to bear the responsibility of the relationship manager. So when I showed you the roles diagram, three of those roles may be one person, but now you're asking that individual to do three distinctly different activities. So let's come back to that. I think I'd like to show you something based on that.
Yeah, please back to your slide.
Yeah, so think about the roles we talked about earlier. Okay. And there's a reason why when I asked this person talking about strategy and kind of portfolio, that was kind of a grin and giggle, because we often do this. We often say the person who has outcome ownership is also responsible to meet regularly with their consumers, which is also the technology owner. Okay, that's three different responsibilities. Where do you think they're going to gravitate to, folks?
Technology.
Yes. So they're going to be
And the problem
spending
with that
time
is
on
when they engage
they're going to be spending most of their time over here. Go ahead, please.
when they engage the customer, they engage in a level of communication that's much deeper than they should, because they're playing multiple roles. And the result of that is that you're giving away valuable consulting time and over servicing the customer.
Yep. So if they do or happen to be the same person, the service owner and the product owner, okay, they have to put different hats on when they're in different conversations. And this discussion needs to lead into this discussion, which is strategy, which is supporting this discussion here. That's why we say is that this is the higher value work of the product owner. This is supposed to be a translation layer into the actual team and the backlog, but their higher value work of time spent is over here. Now, we often say you're the application or technology owner, you should be the product owner. That's a problem because they have a technology mindset versus a business and service mindset. Or we'll make the business analyst the product owner.
By definition, product owner should be like customer proxy or totally from discuss in the business aspect with users or customers, right?
Their focus is left, yes.
Yeah.
And that's true whether they are the service owner or they report into a service owner. They're understanding market. And if their market is the service owner, fine. Now, the interesting thing is vendor management applies the same way. So I wanted to show you this other picture of this diagram. So you've seen this diagram. Well, this engagement model, folks, works the same way when you are the consumer. You've got hopefully strategic vendor management saying, here's the kind of relationships we want to have with vendors of different types: strategic partners, technical providers, transactional providers. So we've delineated different types of relationships with different forms of engagement, with different needs for integration into our value chain. A strategic partner should be hopefully close to collaborative, a tactical provider, cooperative, a transactional provider. Thank you very much for the pizza, right? But I have a strategic approach to integrating suppliers into my value chain, which I'm now front facing over on the left-hand side. Well, who does vendor management or service? This is not, by the way, procurement. That's not, supplier management is not procurement. Procurement is a financial practice for contracting. This is a strategic practice. They need to work with service line owners and people who work with your consumers to know how to best understand this plugin And oh, by the way, there's an account manager, whether that person's coming here or directly over to service line owners, that's a choice you can make, okay? And there's a service owner on their side, and there's relationships and also reviews into how is this working in the context of the overall value chain to the left. So at every point of consumption and provision, we have relationship and engagement. If no one is managing the engagement roles, then you're not having a relationship. And your value proposition is stuck hard left. To get to the right, level 3 or level 4, the roles that we're describing in this conversation are critical success factors. Because it's not a technology conversation on the right. It's an outcome conversation. All products are necessary and good, but products are only a means to an end. Outcomes.
Yeah.
Troy, how would you describe, I know you had a list of responsibilities, but how would you describe the product owner from the service owner in terms of skill?
Mm-hmm.
What are the key skills? Responsibilities, but skill.
So the skill, communication skills, systemic thinking skills. So synthesis versus analysis. The ability to take abstract things and to make them simple for the right audience. Emotional intelligence versus IQ. Presentation
And the
skills.
service owner?
Oh, I'm sorry. The same, but it's at levels of integration, right? So the service owner is also, but it's now focusing on more the total system of value creation, not just the product. So it's about, is this a product conversation or a service conversation? Could be both.
Where does
So-
technical skill come into play?
The service owner doesn't necessarily need to have technical skill, but the product owner does. So the best ideal product owner has a balance of both the business acumen skills that I just listed and the technical skills, because to be able to do the translation between the conversation of outcome and need to what's a definition of done, right? Functional, non-functional requirements. They have to be able to translate the left into the right. The product owner ideally has both. However, how many of the people that you know have a balance between both?
Yeah, and that is exactly reason in our team, product manager and product owner, there are two separate roles. Product owner facing on team side, right-hand side, and product manager, left-hand side. So,
Sure.
yeah, so because of that, I see more and more overlap between our product manager and service owner. Maybe that's not so much important, but
I think you're right. At least they have a systemic viewpoint. Now, the question is the product owner equal service owner? Maybe. But if you have many products in a service outcome, maybe not. And it would probably change by product line.
Where does the bulk of the where does the bulk of the technical skill lie? Is it with the EA, the architect?
So yes, the technology skill specifically is here. A lot of organizations find it actually better to bring a product owner in with some technical conversation, but more left-hand side knowledge versus to promote a product owner from the technical engineering skill set. They only have to be able to translate, not code.
So we, on this Agile Scrum Teams slide, we're calling where we're calling out the development team as the place where the skill is located. But if you were to go back to, as an example, the Scrum team, sorry, let me see if I can find it here. The support organization, right, for Dev and DCC, right, that I showed you out of Confluence, that has a list of all the Scrum teams and what components they're responsible for. Shinya, correct me if I'm wrong here, but one of the things that I recall us talking about was there was a lack of knowledge and understanding of the service layer or the service levels for each of those components. For instance, remote monitoring as a service as opposed to remote monitoring as a product. That service knowledge was lacking, right?
It's, yeah, depending on the product owners, but I have to admit that, yes.
So that's what you have going on right now. And that's fine. You basically have a team captain taking care of specific subcomponents of the product. So is the product manager a service owner? Maybe, depending on the scale of the conversation. Or do you have service line owners? Go ahead.
That aligns with the diagram that Kaz just shared, right?
Yes. And so that's fine because you have a captain over an area, but the product manager is supposed to be responsible for the overall outcome of the product, which is still virtuous because in Scaled Agile, Scrum of Scrums, we'll talk about a chief product owner, right? So you have O365 product owner and you have a Word or PowerPoint product owner. That's just a degree of scale. But O365 is still a product. Office Productivity Services is the service.
Right.
So can I grab the screen real fast? Sure.
Yes, please. Yeah, absolutely.
So based on that definition, this line right here, these PMs, should have all of those soft skills that you described, as well as a certain degree of technical skill related to each of the components over which they are managing. Is that right?
Yes, that's the ideal scenario what you described.
Troy, you seem to have a slide for pretty much everything we've thrown at you. Do you have a slide that illustrates, like, I get ITIL pretty well and all the roles involved with ITIL, and I get Scrum really good when all the roles involved with Scrum, but there's roles that don't exist in one, like the product owner doesn't exist in ITIL. And in ITIL, in service transition, you have project managers and release managers, and that kind of has some overlap in Scrum. Do you have something that kind of like blends Scrum roles and ITIL roles and how it all looks?
So your context of ITIL is true for ITIL version 3. ITIL 4 has completely different, has evolved to include all of the above. First of all, ITIL is no longer comparative to something else. If I describe service management as organizational capabilities for delivering value in the form of products and services, you can't say this is ITIL and that's Agile. This is ITIL and that's TOGAF. This is ITIL and that's, I don't know, SDLC. ITIL simply is a means of describing all of organizational capabilities to take demand from the left and move it to the right. So this is the new operating model view of ITIL. This value chain, think about these boxes as being big box activities in the process of value creation. I've got engagement roles. That's what we've been talking about most of this day.
Hey, Troy, you're not sharing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Hold on. What I just went through there, you didn't see. So the premise of ITIL is no longer ITIL versus. it's grown up to basically be an integration framework or a meta model that says here are all of the organizational capabilities for value creation. It's all going to be supporting the delivery of products and services, whether we're talking information technology, value streams and processes, organizations, partners. It all happens to deliver products and services. So all frameworks basically converge under this concept of a value system, a value chain. So ITIL, don't think of ITIL versus. Simply now think of service management as simply the concept of all organizational capabilities for taking demand and producing value. And those can be grouped, if you want, into macro boxes. Stuff people who do most of their life in design, obtain, build. People spend most of their life over here in engagement loops. People spend most of their lives up here in plan or improve or deliver and support. No single box can create value in isolation. They all have to work collectively as a system. And the speed at which I get through it is the lead time, not how any individual box works in isolation, right? So ITIL 4 is a very different view. This is a true operating model. And you'll have roles that actually, like the service owner, may be involved in every single one of these boxes. So you can't pigeon a role to a specific space. They have roles on the left, roles in the middle, right? Roles above, roles below. And they all exist to create this, which is the output of this value chain. And I have to constantly be measuring whether that's actually still true. So when I think about what is ITIL 4, what is it not? Basically. So the traditional way of thinking about it, I'm going to ask you to think about. Now, interesting enough, like I said, I just taught a course on high velocity IT. So let me pick up the book. We did the internal pilot here. I need to go and sorry. I had to think for a second. Here you go. Here we go. Oh, it's on the front. It's on my desktop. That's where it is. Okay. I just did this week, so I put it to my desktop. So product owner. There's an interesting point of reference for you, Doug. That was the question you just asked me.
Yeah, thank you.
So your reference to ITIL was true in the 2007 version. In 2020, it basically is a completely different story now.
Right.
Yeah, I get it. I should have said I know ITIL v3. Yep, this is a lot to take in.
Mm-hmm. So now we talk about a system of value creation, where software development and management is a key practice in value creation, but it's not separate and distinct. I can't divorce, obtain, build, design, and transition from the larger value chain. If I try to do that, bad things happen with good practice. Right. So really good questions, folks. I really appreciate where you're going with your thought processes here. Now, the interesting thing is this has been extended by DevOps, but do you want to take a break? Because I can talk about this now in the context of how DevOps aligns with this dialogue as well. And then we can get into this process organization.
Yeah, I think 11 o'clock Pacific is a good time because that puts you at what, 2 o'clock?
2 o'clock, yeah.
2 o'clock your time. I know our colleagues in Germany. It's
Dinner time for us, so me and Carsten.
It's just 7. It's okay.
What I
So
would like,
hour, how long do you guys want to take?
I'm easy. Either way, guys.
I'm good for a half hour if that's good enough for everybody else.
Agree.
Fine with me. Fine with me. Yeah.
So just to give you insight to where I'd like to go next, I'd like to talk about cross-functional product teams and how they support outcomes, the kind of culture I need on those. That's going to bring us into another conversation, which is process consistency across organizations, get into governance around process governance, and then evolution of organizational design, even into SIAM, service integration and management. This is now taking the structure conversation beyond just who's my product owner, but now how does that work collectively across a much broader scale? Does that make sense?
Does.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So half an hour from this point.
This has been fantastic so far. I really, really appreciate it. You've done a great job.